Hi there, I'm writer Elena Passarello, and this is Open Book, a literary podcast from Livewire Radio brought to you by Powell's Books, where we talk to writers about their reading habits. When I'm not having fun as Livewire's announcer, writing is my job. I've written 2 nonfiction books, and I'm currently mired in a third, emphasis on mired. Outside my own writing projects, I teach writing in an MFA program here in Oregon. So all of this is to say that books are, without exaggeration, my whole life. The other day, I got some tests run at the doctor's office, and it turns out that my blood is 50% historical fiction. This week, we're talking to one of the nation's most notable music journalists, Ann Powers. Ann is probably best known as a music critic at NPR. She's also written about pop music for the Los Angeles Times and the New York Times, among others. In 2005, she co-wrote the book Piece by Piece with Tori Amos, my high school, imaginary best friend, about the role of women in the music industry. And in 2017, she published Good Booty, Love and Sex, Black and White, Body and Soul in American Music, which examines eroticism in American pop. Her latest book is Traveling on the Path of Joni Mitchell, which maps the life and artistry of this legendary musician. And I'm going to be real with y'all. I was totally fangirling for 100% of this interview. I have read and admired Ann's work since I was in college. She's just so insightful when she writes about the way music shapes us all and defines us all. And now that I know more about who Ann is as a reader, I'm an even bigger fan, and you will be too. Let's have a listen to Ann Powers here on Open Book. Ann Powers, I am so excited to have you on Open Book. Welcome, welcome.
I'm just absolutely thrilled to be here. How fun. We're in Seattle, my favorite city, and we're talking books.
This is your town.
Yes,
yeah?
I grew up here.
Okay.
I did. I grew up at Elliott Bay Bookshop. So, I mean, not literally. I did have a home, but I spent so much time there. And also Seattle Public Library. Basically did grow up in the Magnolia Public Library. Shout out to my favorite librarian, Zani Goldmanis. Actually, after I published my first book, I went back to that library and she was still working there. And I found her and I thanked her and I got a little weepy. And I think she was looking at me like, who is this person? But yeah.
Why was she such a memorable librarian in your past?
Well, I was a real misfit kid. I had skipped a grade and, it was definitely like the chubby, nerdy, wiener dog kind of kid. That's a reference to a movie. But anyway, I was a bit of an outcast. And so I gravitated toward the library because it was a block from my Catholic school where I went.
Right.
And I just lived there, And she not only took me under her wing in terms of turning me on to what to read, but she also empowered me. I remember I gave a puppet show, my never realized career in puppetry, but I staged a puppet show in which I made a 3-headed papier-mâché puppet for the figure of Cerberus, in the story of Demeter and Persephone was what the puppet show was all about. So anyway, thank you,
Very
Zani,
literary.
Even from the beginning, there I was.
Do you remember a book that she turned you on to when you were baby Ann?
I definitely remember a couple of books that I read that time. 3 things. One, I can envision in my mind the layout of that library. And I know where the myth books were. I was very fixated, especially on Norse myths. Help me. And just living right there next to that shelf and reading them all. Also, the scariest book I ever read, which was called Ghosts, Ghosts, and More Ghosts. I think the author was Robert Arthur. Very frightening book. And also then, precocious kid that I was, I somehow made my way to Camus' The Stranger when I was 11. So
I remember this from your book.
It's kind of a dark childhood, but what can I say?
Well, after you go ghosts, and more ghosts, the only next step is Camus.
Oh my gosh! And there was this one story in that book. I think it was called The Rose Crystal Heart. And it was about this man who went to a fortune teller or something, and she said, "You are going to be killed when you hear a bell ring," or something, And the whole story is how he's escaping that, all these things that could have killed him. And then in the end, he hears a bell or something and he falls down a staircase, and for some reason he has a pendant on that is a rose crystal heart, and it pierces him in the heart and he dies.
No.
And I was like, whoa, especially as a Catholic. And I'm like, really can't escape my fate. This is freaking me out. So anyway.
Are you still a horror reader?
I don't know. I definitely have read some of the classic Gothic horror, Wilkie Collins or, is Wuthering Heights a horror book, I guess,
I mean, I think sometimes when I'm in a certain like hotel or Airbnb and there's a certain kind of window, the horror movie that is Wuthering Heights sort of plays if it's a windy night. Well, what are your reading habits like now? Like what kind of modalities do you use? Are you a page-only audiobook?
I'm really not page-only. I'm very much a platform jumper. So, and I've kind of divided things up a bit. So I tend to listen to audiobooks for fiction. That's my pleasure. And I do that while walking often or cooking. And then nonfiction, I never listen to on an audiobook because pretty much every time I'm reading a nonfiction book, I'm taking notes. All my books are littered with Post-its, because just either I'm working on a new project or I may work on a project that might involve this book one day. So I also, use a journal app to write down quotes and things and keep that for future reference. And then I do also have a Kindle, which I mostly take on planes. It's light, literally light reading. So the Kindle is just for travel mostly.
When you are not reading for work, that's usually fiction and that's usually audio format.
I do have another kind of genre of book or style of book I read more for pleasure. But then often I quote it in my work or whatever, which is kind of the hybrid form, similar to my own work, like an author like Melissa Fabos or Olivia Lang is one of my absolute favorites, and those kinds of writers who are mixing kind of memoir, cultural criticism, a little bit of reporting maybe, and beautiful writing. I love this essayist Joni Tevis. There's so many.
I love Joni.
I love that you light up at her. I love that you light up at her name. That makes me so happy because I'm a huge fan of hers.
Oh, I hope I'm going to make her listen to this. She's going to love this. Her book, she's a really unspoken or unsung hero of the American essay.
Yes, she truly is. And
she
deserves much more acknowledgement.
You've been in this game for long enough that you probably have a full roster of writers that you know and that you work with. How do you keep tabs on the new writers, the new voices? What's that diet like?
Yeah, it's a challenge. For music writers specifically, and we are definitely a clan or I guess Game of Thrones style, mini clans, and when I lived in New York, of course, where so many writers live, it was really a social scene, and it still is a social scene. My husband, Eric Weisbart, has long organized this conference called the Pop Conference.
Oh, yeah.
It was started here in Seattle, Washington at the now Museum of Popular Culture. That's been going for, I think, 23 years now.
Yeah, I went to the one in 2007.
Oh, wow.
I had a panel on Iowa hip-hop.
Oh, my gosh,
that I had
amazing.
no business doing.
I love that.
And I remember Greil Marcus was sitting in front of me, and his wife was knitting.
Yes, Jenny. She always knits
so
at the Pop Conference. I know. That's so cool.
It was like my first time around music writers.
We have, whether it's academics, scholars, or journalists, we have ways of kind of keeping in touch with each other. But it's also, actually, the internet has helped so much. Strange to say, because the internet has hurt so much in terms of writers being able to make a living. But as far as us being aware of each other and being able to connect with each other, it's been a real gift. And, I have my places I go every week, whether it's Pitchfork or Hearing Things or Stereogum and places like that. Also, more general interest publications like N+1 or The Drift or whatever. And then, well, I don't know how you're coping with it, but the endless flood of Substacks, trying to keep track of them.
Yeah, that's
challenging.
I'm trying to tell myself that I'm going to wean myself off of other forms of social media so I can make space, because I feel like Substack takes more time. Like
it definitely does.
Like I want to read, I want to engage with things that someone spent time on. That's my new kind of mantra. So.
I think that is an admirable goal for sure. It's hard though, but I think also the one good thing I'll say about the more scrolly forms of social media is they have allowed me to connect with people with whom otherwise I may never have actually spoken. You know, the Twitter friend. I mean, is it a real friendship? Who knows? Who knows? But out of that has come good connections and being able to say to someone, hey, I love that thing you wrote.
Yeah.
That's really powerful.
Are you listening, everyone? We need to make sure we reach out to the right.
No, seriously. And I'll tell you something else. You mentioned Greil Marcus.
Yeah.
So Greil was an early mentor of mine when I lived in San Francisco when I was like 22, 23 years old and writing for the SF Weekly, Alternative Weekly. And then, as now, although now he uses email, he sends notes of praise to writers he admires.
Wow.
I would receive a postcard occasionally from Greil.
Whoa.
And this is ongoing throughout my life. Just a little postcard saying, oh, what you wrote, it made me think in a different way or anything like that. And just that simple gesture on his part made such a difference to me.
Yeah, just the idea that you would be able to change the thinking of somebody who helped you figure out who
gosh.
you were as a thinker.
Yeah,
it's a big deal.
It's someone who was so fundamental to me. I mean, reading Mystery Train really that's the book that convinced me that I could be a serious writer and a music writer at the same time.
And Mystery Train was probably at least 10, 15 years old by the time you got to it.
Yes,
it's
it
from
was.
the early 70s.
Yeah.
What was it about it that...
It actually was, I believe it was his master's thesis. It was a sort of, images of America through popular music. And so great chapters on Elvis, Sly Stone, the band, all these different figures.
While they were still working, right?
Yeah.
So
but
cool
it was
to
really like historic. It was basic American studies style essay writing, but about popular music, which people just didn't take seriously as a subject.
This is a perfect thing to talk about, like a fundamental book, like what is it about? And everybody should still read Mystery Train. So
Yeah. But there's so many other writers since then who have taken up that form, and someone who always deserves mention in 2025 is Hanif Abdurraqib, who really has shown how you can do that kind of work for a new generation.
Yeah.
I'm a huge Hanif fan, and
me too.
His poeticism, his masterful use of memoir and autobiography, but also, most of all, I think, that connection he has with his reader. I remember the first time I saw Hanif read, he literally got on the floor and was like at reader level, maybe a little below the eyes of his reader, and just that willingness to humble himself, to not be distanced, I think was a sign that he would become what he became.
Is that when you share your book with people in readings or in interviews?
I'm too old to get on the floor.
What does it feel like to you, though, as a writer and a reader, to share your work with other people? What's your strategy for that one-on-one or that in-person version of yourself?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, especially now, because I think the book promotion circuit has moved more toward the interview.
Yeah.
I'm maybe like you, often on both sides. Sometimes I'm the subject, sometimes I'm the interviewer. Sometimes it's a more even conversation. And I love that. I mean, I love having a public conversation. It's a huge part of my career. But I am rarely asked to do just straight up readings, maybe because I'm a nonfiction writer also and a music writer. So something that I don't love about the kind of popular conception of arts writing in general is that the writing itself, the prose itself, I feel like the bar is set lower, that you're not necessarily expected to be an amazing writer at the level of the sentence if you're writing about a popular cultural subject. But all the writers I admire are, whether it's David Thompson in film or Emily Nussbaum in TV or someone whose recent book I really loved is Ira Madison. Know Ira? Yeah, he published a book of essays called Pure Innocent Fun, which it's like talking to a super smart person whose every single cell in their body is pop culture, But it also is great on the level of a sentence,
Yeah, it's funny and fun.
Yeah.
He's great with interjections.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of, we always like to end with this controversial question. Yeah. Do you, Ann Powers, have a controversial reading opinion or book opinion that you'd like to lay on us?
Well, I do, but I think it was controversial maybe 20 years ago and less so now. But, it's that trash can be great.
Yes.
And now we both have the academic study of genres like romance literature, obviously sci-fi, detective novels, all that stuff. And romantasy is like ruling everything. It's the most popular kind of fiction out there right now. But I did my master's thesis on kind of the Hollywood novel, and I, of course, read Nathaniel West and F. Scott Fitzgerald and people like that, but I also read Jackie Suzanne because you know what? Jackie Suzanne changed the culture.
She did.
She totally did. And those novels, they're pure trash for sure. Like, they are not aspiring to be literary. I remember this picture. I'm talking about Once Is Not Enough. I'm talking about Valley of the Dolls.
Oh, yeah.
Valley of the Dolls, great on every level, not only a great book, a great trashy book, a great trashy movie. Also, one of the best movie theme songs ever, written by the great Dory Previn. So there you go.
Okay.
Anyway, I remember seeing this picture of Jackie Suzanne that still inspires me so much. It was her in her office. She had this whiteboard before there were whiteboards or something. It was full of pieces of paper with, like, she was plotting out her novel, and it was like a war room, it was like a war strategy, and I was just like, man, that woman, she knows how to write. She knows how to land the plane.
That's right.
So read the trash. Why not?
Yeah.
Some of it's gonna be horrible, but you're gonna find some gems.
Okay, so I'm going to read Valley of the Dolls, which I've never read. One more trashy
Once Is Not
title.
Enough.
Once Is Not Enough.
Yeah, Once Is Not Enough, which when I was in grade school, we're circling back to my grade school stories. When I was a kid, I was at my neighbor's house back in the day when you could run rampant and your parents didn't pay attention to you in the 70s. I was sitting in my neighbors, the Golics, who lived up the street. My brother was running around with his friend who was one of the kids in that family. I was left alone, and I picked up that book, and I was sitting there reading it, and I remember the dad, Mr. Golick, comes in, and he looks at me. He was a classic 70s dad, like mustache. I think he might have been like a contractor. I don't know. He was just a classic 70s dad. He comes in, he looks at me, he's like, does your mom know you're reading that? I'm like, yes. He turned around and walked out. So thank you, Mr. Golick. You set me on my path.
Mr. Golick, what was the name of your favorite
Zani
librarian?
Goldmanis, my librarian, all the greats.
Shout out to all of the early book pushers who made Ann Powers who she is today.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for talking about reading with me. I really have enjoyed talking to you so much.
This was so fun.
That was writer Ann Powers on Open Book. Her book, Traveling on the Path of Joni Mitchell, is out now. Be sure to grab it at powells.com. Thanks for listening to Open Book. I'm Elena Passarello, your host. Our executive producer is Laura Haddon, and our producer and editor is Melanie Sevchenko. Eben Hoffer is our technical director. Hazik bin Ahmad Farid is our mixer. A. Walker Spring composed our theme song, and Ashley Park is our social media marketer. A big thanks to the entire staff at Livewire Radio, the fine folks at PRX, and of course, Powell's Books for sponsoring this podcast.